Hey, have you ever made a snap decision and then, like 5 minutes later, thought, wait, why on earth did I do that? Or, been absolutely positive about something only to find out you were totally wrong? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on our own minds and take a look at the hidden forces that are secretly driving pretty much all of our choices.
So, it all starts with this simple, kind of provocative idea. Your brain is built to be lazy. Seriously, it's designed to conserve energy whenever possible. It just loves taking shortcuts and following the path of least resistance. And while that makes it incredibly efficient, it's also the root cause of some of our biggest, most common errors in judgment.
Now, to really get how this works, we need to meet the two, let's call them characters, who are running the show inside your head. As the Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman explains it, our thinking is basically split between two very, very different systems.
Okay, think of it like this. System 1 is your autopilot. It's the part of you that's handling all the routine stuff in the background, making instant judgments, reacting to the world, all without you even having to think about it. Then you have System 2. That's the pilot. You call on the pilot when you really need to focus, solve a tough problem, or maybe override one of those gut impulses from the autopilot.
So here are the more, official definitions. System 1 is our fast, intuitive, and often really emotional thinking. It just operates automatically with almost zero effort. System 2, on the other hand, is our slower, more deliberate, and logical mind. It's what we use for complex math problems and paying close attention. But here's the catch. The pilot, System 2, it gets tired really easily and honestly would much rather just let the autopilot run things.
So, this brings us to a really crucial question. If the autopilot is sometimes flawed, why do we rely on it so much? Well, the answer comes down to our brain's natural and very powerful preference for things to be easy.
The key idea here is something called cognitive ease. It's basically just a measure of how much mental heavy lifting a task requires. When things feel easy and familiar, we're in a state of cognitive ease. Our brain is happy, our guard is totally down, and we tend to just accept information without really questioning it.
For example, I bet you can read this perfectly, right? Even though all the words are jumbled up. That is your System 1 autopilot doing its thing. It sees a pattern it recognizes, it fills in all the gaps, and it just delivers the meaning to you instantly, without ever having to wake up the pilot to do any hard work. Pretty cool, huh?
So what creates this comfortable feeling of ease? It really boils down to four main things. First, repetition. If we hear something over and over, it feels familiar and true. Second, a clear display, like simple fonts and easy language, reduces mental strain. Third, a primed idea, where one thought just flows easily to the next. That feels supernatural. And last but not least, a good mood actually makes us more intuitive and less critical.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little messy. Our brain's absolute love for cognitive ease, for the simple, easy answer, makes us really vulnerable to predictable mistakes. And these are what psychologists call cognitive biases.
Look, our autopilot is fantastic for efficiency, but it was never really designed for perfect accuracy. It uses these mental shortcuts or heuristics that work most of the time, but these same shortcuts are also the source of our biggest blind spots and these systematic errors in how we think.
And one of the biggest blind spots is explained by something called prospect theory. Now, the main point is this. We don't evaluate things in absolute terms. We judge them based on whether they feel like a gain or a loss from where we're standing. And here's the real kicker. The pain of a loss feels way, way more intense than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
Let me just ask you this. Would you take a guaranteed $450 right now, or a 50-50 shot at winning $1,000? If you're like most people, you chose the sure thing, the $450. And that's even though the gamble has a higher expected value. That's your autopilot being risk-averse when it comes to gains. It just prefers a certain win over a risky one that could be bigger.
And this table just brilliantly lays out how our attitude toward risk completely flips depending on the situation. We're cautious when it comes to high probability gains, but we actually become risk-seeking when faced with a high probability loss. We would rather gamble to try and avoid a sure loss. And it's the exact opposite for low probabilities, which is why we do things that seem contradictory, like buying lottery tickets and buying insurance.
And all of this leads to another really powerful bias, the illusion of validity. This is our tendency to believe that our own judgments and predictions are way more accurate than they actually are. The confidence we feel is often just based on how good the story we're telling ourselves sounds, not on the actual quality of the evidence.
Kahneman himself experienced this firsthand.
He was tasked with predicting which soldiers would become good officers. He and his team felt incredibly confident in their predictions. But later, when they looked at the data, their forecasts were barely better than random guesses. They knew their method wasn't working, but they kept feeling confident anyway. That's the illusion of validity in action.
Okay, so if our brains are wired with all these glitches, what can we possibly do about it? Well, this final part is all about how to wake up that thoughtful pilot a little more often.
The solution is actually pretty simple, but it isn't always easy. The single most critical step is just awareness. Just recognizing that your gut feeling might be one of these cognitive shortcuts. That's the trigger you need to slow down and wake up your more analytical system too. So here are a few practical things you can start doing. First, be genuinely open to different perspectives instead of just looking for stuff that confirms what you already think. Second, investigate information that feels a little too easy or familiar. Third, check it against multiple sources. And finally, and this is a big one, learn to embrace a little mental strain. That feeling of discomfort often means your pilot is engaged and you're actually thinking, not just reacting.
So I want to leave you with a question to take with you. Now that you know your autopilot is always running in the background, what's one decision, big or small, that you're going to make a point to slow down and really rethink this week?